Well, welcome everyone to Law Talk, brought to you by the Falvello Law Firm. Remember, falvellolaw.com. You could go to the website, gain a lot of information. The phone number is 570-788-4191. Remember, if you have any questions that you'd like me to ask Alexis or Connie, please email them to me at sam@ssptv.com. We have a number of questions today we're going to talk about. It's called Law Talk. And joining me is the owner. But your office is really busy. You've been doing.
We've been keeping busy. Actually, we've had a lot of estate work lately, and preparation for estates as well on behalf of people. So my dad's actually out this week, so he's at the beach with my brother's kids, enjoying his time with his grandchildren, and so I have a lot of his files that are coming through this week. So
how do you manage it?
So, well, it just depends on the day, right? You know, you prioritize what needs to get done on any particular day, and you work or make appointments for evenings and weekends if need be. And that's just the commitment that I have to the practice, but also that I learned from my dad as well. And also to be accommodating to clients, because I do understand their commitment to their jobs as well. And if they're working 9 to 5, it's tough to get out for an appointment with a lawyer sometimes. So.
And speaking of that, to cover some of the questions here, when a client has a concern, how do you assess that concern? In other words, you know, is it a case that you would take, or how do you determine?
Well, in any case, what we do is first we look at the facts of the case, right? And with car crashes, you know, which is what we do primarily, the first thing we do is look at the police report and see what the facts of the case are, or the facts alleged in the police report. And then we get information from the client to see what their understanding of what happened is or was. And then we look at the law and we apply the applicable law. And kind of folding into that, we look at the kind of car insurance coverage that they have to see what's available to the client if they're not liable for causing the accident. So that's the first steps in our analysis. You know, looking at the evidence, do we need to collect additional evidence, hire a private investigator? These are things that we do if need be.
You know, this person was involved with a hit and run
Yes.
accident, and the person left the scene of the accident, multiple damages occurred. Right. And here again, my friends, listen to me, listen to Uncle Sammy, full tort on your insurance. And we're going to tell you why. Here's a situation where this person was hit and run and the other person flew the coop.
Right.
So tell me what they should have had.
So, well, full tort is important because that ensures you can pursue pain and suffering damages as well. But in a situation where you have somebody who's a victim of a hit and run case, you want to make sure that you have what's called underinsurance coverage.
Doesn't that come with full tort?
So it's not an automatic trigger that if you have full tort that you have underinsurance. There are two different selections that are available to an individual when they're getting their car insurance coverage. So if you're hit by an uninsured driver and you don't carry the underinsurance coverage, then unless the police locate the person who's responsible for the hit and run, there's no recovery available to the victim, unfortunately. So,
Wow, that could be serious.
Yes, because you can be physically injured,
yes,
and those can be damages, but you can also have property damage on your vehicle as well. And again, if you don't have the appropriate underinsurance coverage, then there's nothing to recover for that victim.
So full tort does not cover uninsured?
Correct, yes.
Wow.
And just in line with that, there's underinsurance coverage as well. So say the person responsible for causing the accident had the state minimum of 15 and there are catastrophic injuries, you want to make sure that you have underinsurance coverage as well. And that is something that you can pursue through your own insurance if there's not enough coverage available with the person who's responsible for causing the crash. So
in this case, the person didn't tell me what insurance they had. They just said, you know, how would you represent? So you have to know the facts first.
We
All right,
would.
assuming they had that insurance, you know, what is the process there?
The process just would be notifying the insurance carrier for the victim of the hit and run with that coverage, seeing what the coverage available is, and then evaluating the case to see what the value of the damages are, and then pursuing recovery through an underinsurance carrier, and that being the insured party who is the victim of the hit and run.
Okay, so how do you answer this question? Okay, sometimes when you get in a little accident, sometimes you don't think it's, you know, maybe someone hit your side or the back or whatever, and you know, the insurance, they say, look, if you could work it out, you know, work it out, okay, so you look at the car and maybe the car was hit on the rear end and, you know, swerve, but you get out, you're not, you know, you just see damage and there's so you take your phone, you take a picture of that, etc. They tell you to do that, so instead of bringing the cops and everybody else down, okay? However, what happens sometimes is that when that person hit your rear end and jarred you this way, you did not feel anything at the time, so you took a picture, they take a picture, etc. What do you do in that case?
Well, I think it just, time will dictate really the outcome of that case, right? I've said before, I did vehicular homicides when I was in Luzerne County DA's office, and I've seen cases where vehicles have had minimal damage that resulted in, unfortunately, in the death of an individual. But I've also seen cases where there has been significant damage and the person has walked away with minimal injuries. So what the insurance companies tend to do is to say, okay, they look at the physical damage of the property, of the vehicle, and they think that physical damage always is an indicator as to how severely injured a person is, and that's not always the case. So we look and evaluate, you know, the treatment that the person received. Did they have any prior issues? If they did have any prior issues, how have their symptoms or injuries increased since the crash occurred? So there's a variety of things that we look at, you know, in addition to the property damage.
See, sometimes that's a good thing and a bad thing, because if someone hits your rear end, you know, and you hit you, right, and you get out and their front is, so you take a picture, no one that you think at that moment is injured. But now what happens is the person starts experiencing pain the next day. But when they call the insurance company and say, wait a minute, who was at fault? Well, he hit me or she hit me in the rear. Well, wait a minute, you know, were you on the right road? Were you going the right way? And you know, you have these questions that, you know, should have been answered at the time. So is it a good thing to get a report at the time, or what should you do?
I would recommend always getting a police report, because then you have an independent party documenting what the crash, how the crash actually occurred, what the damage was, so on and so forth. I did have a case once where the insurance company, I think their max offer was $12,000 they had on the table. And they didn't think the value of the case was worth more than that. But the client had significant injuries. However, the client didn't call the police at the crash because it was a rear-end crash. He wanted to get on with his day, right? He wanted to go to work, and unfortunately, as the days passed after the accident, his symptoms just progressed rather significantly. So that was a case that ultimately we were awarded from a judge a settlement of close to $500,000 because he was significantly injured.
From $12,000
so, yes.
to $500,000.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that was, like I said, a rear-end accident. Again, I think the insurance company looked at the minimal damage to the vehicle that he was in, but also the minimal damage to the vehicle that the person responsible was in, and the fact that the police weren't called. He didn't immediately go to the emergency room. But again, as time passed, his symptoms significantly progressed.
So from start to finish, Alexis, this is where the person's talking about experience, okay? What was the timetable there, you know?
Well, that case was in litigation. Okay. So I couldn't tell you exactly how long it took for us to resolve that case. Yeah. But I can tell you
there's a lot of work
years.
in between, huh?
Yes, because we needed to pull in experts that were going to connect the crash itself to the injuries that this gentleman unfortunately sustained. So we needed to pull in experts in order to proceed with that, and also pull in experts in making a determination as to what his work capability was moving forward because of those injuries that he sustained in this crash.
See, that's where I think the person here is talking about, how do we know, the lawyer we're going to has the experience that we need to meet my case.
Right.
Okay, there's different cases. And that's what you determine when that person comes to you.
Right. I mean, and I think too, drawing from my time in the DA's office, that's been significant because I learned a lot, especially doing vehicular homicides. I had several fatal hit and run crashes, throughout my time in the DA's office. And you put the work in because you wanted to find the person responsible, but I also learned a lot about the process in obtaining the evidence, getting the necessary facts, and proceeding using facts that were not disputable, because that's beneficial in a case, right? You wanna kind of have your argument be as airtight as possible to prevent any wiggle room for other potential causes or possibilities to injuries that your client sustained. So, I credit the work that I did, alongside law enforcement with that learning process, because it really helped me learn a lot, and it helps me in my civil practice.
And that's, here again, it's important to know that you're going to a person that understands all of the facets. Folks, I'm talking to Alexis Falvello, the owner of Falvello Law Firm. Remember, it's falvellolaw.com. 570-788-4191 is their phone number. Just don't hesitate to give them a call. We'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to Law Talk, my friends, brought to you by the Falvello Law Firm, falvellolaw.com, 570-788-4191. Joining me today is the owner of Falvello Law Firm, Alexis Falvello. There's a lot of things that people need lawyers for, okay, and you cover a lot of areas. Before I get to this one specific question, and remember, my friends, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask Alexis, sam@ssptv.com is my email. Be more than happy to bring those questions up for Alexis. Living wills.
Yes.
And you say you're doing a lot of estates. So
yes.
What are some things that we should be looking at?
Right. So a living will is, in essence, a declaration, right, of an individual saying, should I be incapacitated and in need of medical care, you're selecting what you do or do not want to have as far as your treatment goes. And I always say that provides comfort not only to the person who's saying this is what I do or don't want, it also gives them control over how they're medically treated, even if they can't communicate what their wishes are. But I also think it provides comfort to your loved one, right? So having been in a position where my mother's a cancer survivor, she was very ill for a very long period of, it seemed like a very long period of time. I know other people have battled longer battles, but she was diagnosed and placed inpatient immediately after being diagnosed, and the paperwork that we had in place was significantly helpful and comforting to her, but also to our family, knowing that if we needed to rely on those documents, we'd be doing right by her and what her wishes are. So that's a living will. But we also have what's called a healthcare power of attorney that appoints your designated agent to handle any decisions that need to be made on your behalf if you're in a position where you're not able to make them yourself.
So here's a situation. When you do a living will, you're probably in good health. I mean, other than me, so you're feeling good. And when it comes to, you want to be resuscitated? No, and no, I don't want to suffer, boss. So you fill it out, and now down the road, okay, you get sick, and you're not feeling well, and you start realizing that this could be serious. And you're telling your spouse or whomever you know, I put down I don't want to be, but maybe I do want to be resuscitated, okay? And you're talking about it, but you never make the change, okay? And, you know, so now it comes to the point where they're in a critical situation, and they're looking and say, well, this person doesn't, no, she told me that she wanted to be resuscitated, you know, well, it's not on here. No, but we had these conversations, and now you're in a dilemma because she's been telling you that, or him. So what do you do in that case?
Well, I think if you're the loved one who's advocating on behalf of your you know, the sick individual, you have a conversation with the doctor, and you tell the doctor what that person's wishes are. And you'd have to leave it at that. You know, having a brother who is a physician, I will say that, you know, most physicians are in the business of trying to save lives. So, you know, again, I think that's a conversation for you to have with the doctor who's treating your loved one.
Okay. So there's some hope there, because even though but they should have changed it, right?
They should change it, and you can at any point in time. You know, when we do these for clients, I tell them always, if you want to change anything, just come on back and we can easily make the change.
So here's a question, okay? Besides having a law degree, what kind of special training do you have pertaining to my lawsuit over a fall I had, and no one was a witness? And what are your fees?
Right. So in addition to a law degree, we're obligated to take continuing legal education classes, and those are a variety of classes across the legal spectrum as far as what your particular area of practice is. And of course, slip and fall, that's a personal injury case. So, you know, I have taken many, we call them CLEs, on slip and fall cases. I do think, though, that experience also is in a way training, because you learn from those other cases that you've handled on behalf of injured parties. And as far as fees go, for personal injury cases, they're always contingency based. Typically, they're 1/3 of anything recovered on behalf of the client that you represent.
Here again, going behind the scenes, okay? You know, people look at, well, they settled for this. Well, you know, you got 1/3, so you know, what I sometimes maybe we don't understand is all of the things that you had to do to get to that case. You just mentioned about the one case you had where you had the Boston, what was it?
Yes.
The case?
So I did handle a fatal hit and run. Sadly, it involved a victim who was only 5 years old. And this was during my time in the DA's office. The incident occurred 4 days before Christmas. The family was lovely and understandably devastated. So while in the DA's office, we pulled in an expert from Washington State, and this is where I worked hand in hand with these law enforcement officers to recreate the crime scene using technology that was so advanced. We set up, much like your tripods here, we set up tripods and took took images of the location where the incident occurred, and we recreated that, but we also took our suspect's vehicle and kind of superimposed it over the still footage that we pulled off of Wilkes-Barre City's Hawkeye system, which was their security system at the time. And because our suspect had recently had his headlight replaced, it was as if his headlight was offering a fingerprint that was unique only to that vehicle. And as we superimposed his car over the still image that we recovered from the crash scene, there literally was, like, in the room, you know, there was kind of a gasp, because we knew we had the person responsible. Again, we pulled in this expert from Washington State, and then at a later time, my dad was channel surfing after the Boston City Marathon bombings, and this, you know, expert was offering his comments about that and how they would go about pursuing that suspect. And he was offering those comments as he was on CNN, being interviewed for the evening news.
And that wasn't cheap.
So, no, it wasn't. And that was a decision collectively made in the DA's office that it was an expense certainly worth.
And that happens with private cases as well.
Correct.
I mean, so
Yes.
there's a lot of expert witnesses that you have to, first of all, you have to find them, you have to make sure, and you have to pay, of course. So there's a lot of other things that people sometimes don't realize that are involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you explain that to people?
Well, I try to, and sometimes it's as the case develops, because we have to see first what, if any, funds are available, right, as far as coverage.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're not going to put a whole lot of money into a case where there's limited coverage, and that's a fine line that, as a litigator, you're walking with these personal injury cases, because you certainly want to establish the best case for your client, but you want to do so responsibly, knowing that any investment you make financially, because at the end of the day, it's your client's money. You know, we put it out, but that's something that's also, you know, in addition to the fees deducted from the settlement. So you want to make sure it's a sensible investment if it can produce, you know, a higher recovery amount.
I found it so important, Alexi, in the dealings I've had throughout the years, is never take a shortcut. You know, when we first started, you took some shortcuts in this business, and boy, you paid the price down the road, okay, whether it came for quality. So we stopped that in 1995. Now when we do stuff, it's either first class or we don't do it, okay? And I think that's where people are always concerned, because you see billboards, paper ads, etc., and you know, you see these guys on television or girls on television say, well, who do I trust, you know, in terms of coming, you know. Nothing like finding a person who is in your hometown, who has experience such as you do and your dad. And we have a lot of great lawyers in Northeast of Pennsylvania.
We do.
Yeah, I mean, we're
we
blessed.
certainly do. Yes.
But I think that's always a concern for people, and making sure, because they're concerned. You know, it's
well, and you mentioning that, I did have a conversation. My brother's an orthopedic here locally. And,
the best.
You know, I think he's pretty
Anthony
good.
Falvello, he's the best.
But, you know, just in conversation, he and I were saying, you know, we could have gone elsewhere to pursue careers, right? We chose to stay here, each of us individually chose to stay here because we care about the people here in this community, truly. And we want what's best for them as far as, you know, professionally what we do. And that is, you know, a very sincere sentiment because, you know, we enjoy what we do, but we enjoy the people locally that we do it for.
How many years?
So, that I've been here?
No. Falvello.
Oh, 100.
100 years.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I really miss?
So.
I miss your grandfather.
I do too.
Tony, I wish he was here today to be able to see, you know, how his granddaughter and how everything developed, and you know, he'd be extremely proud. He was always proud, you know, and you know, your dad and I were like this, you know, very close. I miss him. Well, it's my friends, if you have any questions, it's called Law Talk, and we're more than happy to cover whatever your questions are, or go to their website, favellolaw.com, 788-5191. With 570. Remember, get someone who is experienced and will tell you the way it is, not just give you small talk, but tell you the way it is. We'll see you next time on Law Talk.